Hello everyone, this is Void Spirit. I'm here to bring you guys amazing fanfiction that you will surely enjoy. But before we start, please subscribe and like the video for more amazing content. Disclaimer is in the first chapter. Arc I, Orcus Great Labyrinth, Part 07. After Hajime and his group left the room where Yu had been sealed with the harvested flesh from the defeated Scorpion and Cyclops, they then carried it all back to their base. Transporting such a huge quantity of meat was no easy feat, but after giving Yu more of his blood to restore her energy, Hajime was able to enlist her help. Kaori and Shizuku also helped carrying the monster meat. With their combined strength, enhanced by Yu's body empowering magic, they were able to transport the vast quantities of meat to their hideout. Originally, Hajime had suggested using the room as a new base, but Yu had rejected the proposal. He supposed it was understandable. She was probably sick of staring at the walls of what had been her prison for centuries. Even if they were going to be stuck on this floor until Hajime replenished his stock of supplies, it was better for her mental health to have Yu out of that room. Thus, they were spending the time talking and getting to know each other better while they scavenged for supplies. So that means you have to be at least 300 years old, right Yu? Hajime inquired to the vampire who was sitting at his left while Kaori took the spot on his right. The light magic user had started to talk again after they arrived in the hideout. Since Hajime was used by Kaori's clinginess and her blatant attempt in seduction, Hajime didn't seem to be bothered by Yu as an addition. Inwardly, he couldn't help but think that he was fortunate to experience a flower in each hand scenario. It's rude to ask a girl her age. Yu glared angrily at Hajime. It seemed even in parallel worlds asking a girl about her age was taboo. That is right. Hajime shouldn't ask a girl about their age. That's super rude. Even the one you ask is actually very old. Kaori nodded while giving Hajime a reprimanding gaze. She totally missed the murderous glare from the old vampire in the question. Hajime sighed heavily and stared at the stone ceiling in resignation. Inwardly, his mind was somewhere else. From what he recalled, the vampires had been destroyed in a massive war that had enveloped the land 300 years ago. Chances were Yu had lost track of time, trapped in the silent darkness as she had been, but it stood to reason that she must have been at least that old. If she'd been sealed at the age of 20 or so, then she was most likely far older than even 300. Do all vampires live as long as you? Hajime inquired after he returned back to his work, creating his new weapon. No, I'm an exception. I don't age because of my regenerative powers. According to Yu, she had stopped aging ever since she had awoken to her powers at her 13 years old age. Average vampires could still extend their lifespan by drinking the blood of other races, but even then they couldn't live much longer than 200 years or so. As a frame of reference, humans in this world lived an average of 70 years, while demons' lifespan was a bit longer at 120. Beastmen had varying lifespans, depending on the specific race. Elves, for example, could live for centuries. The reason for Yu's exceptional powers was because she had inherited the blood of the ancient atavistic vampires, or so she believed. Her lineage had made her one of the strongest creatures in the world at the time, and she had ascended to the throne at the tender age of 17. Yu's demigod status gave her with the automatic regeneration, and direct mana manipulation. Better yet, she was nigh immortal. Only gods or devils could aspire to that level of strength. And it seemed Yu had been classified as one of the latter. It was ironic though, since she had a body worthy to house divine soul. Yu believed that her uncle, blinded by his greed and ambition, had perpetrated the misconception among his fellow vampires that Yu was indeed a devil. He had then used that as justification to try and kill her, but had been stymied by her automatic regeneration. As a result, he had ended up sealing her here in this underground abyss instead. At the time, she had been too shocked by the sudden betrayal to resist capture. By the time she'd regained enough of her composure to understand what had just happened, she had already been sealed. Inside the rock cube. From Yu's explanation, both Hajime and Kaori realized that Yu didn't know about her special existence as demigod, or the reason behind her uncle's betrayal. They shared a silent glance for a moment and decided to keep about that information from Yu until they found time to show the recording of Denreed. Which was why she had no idea how that scorpion had come to dwell there, how she'd been sealed, or even how they'd managed to bring her down here into the depths of hell. Hajime had been a little disappointed when he'd heard that, as he'd hoped she might have known some way out. She discussed the specifics of her powers with him at length as well. Supposedly she had perfect affinity with every element. At one point Hajime and Kaori recalled saying, "What the hell, you're totally overpowered." And, "I won't lose," to which Yu had replied by saying she wasn't very skilled at close quarters combat. The best she was capable of doing was using strengthening magic to increase her physical abilities to run around while firing off spells as fast as she could. Of course, her ability to ignore wounds thanks to her innate regeneration and the overwhelming might of her spells meant that was still enough to kill almost everything. An interesting thing to note was the fact that she still said spell names out loud, despite having no need for chance of any kind. It seemed it had just become a habit since she had started learning that way. Even those with an affinity for magic usually had to say something related to the spell to keep a firm image of it in their minds, and it seemed even Yu was no exception. Her automatic regeneration appeared to be a kind of special magic similar to what monsters had, and would naturally activate so long as she had mana remaining. It was also the reason why Hajime, Kaori and Shizuku could get the same skill from eating her body parts. Unless Yu was literally reduced to ashes in an instant, she could come back from any injury. But, looking at it from another angle, which meant that once her mana dried up she would no longer heal. Had she taken any damage in that fight with the scorpion, she would undoubtedly have died. Not like they, mostly Hajime, could leave Yu alone since the door was sealed in the first place. Of course, they could let Yu die in scorpion attack and they killed the distracted scorpion, but Hajime decided to help Yu in the end. Anyway. On to the most important question. Yu, do you have any idea where we are? Or better yet, any idea how to get back to the surface? Hajime and Kaori realized that the labyrinth was a kind of test from the recording they found. They hoped Yu knew something about it. Unfortunately, I don't. However, it seemed Yu was unsure of their exact location too. Though her tone was apologetic, the way she trailed off implied that she knew something at least. According to legend, this labyrinth was built by one of the Mavericks. The Mavericks. Kaori frowned when she heard that. On top of being an unfamiliar word, it had a rather ominous ring to it. They just realized the god of this world, Ihitoriju, was their enemy and they didn't think they could afford other powerful enemies. Hajime and Kaori turned to face Yu fully. She met Hajime's eyes, totally ignoring Kaori's, before nodding sharply and continuing. They were rebels that tried to bring about the end of the world. With how reticent and expressionless Yu was, her explanations always took time. For his part, Hajime had a boatload of transmutation to get through, so he settled back to listen while he worked on replenishing his supply of ammunition. The scorpion had also shown him just how lacking in strength he was, and he had started work on a new weapon to rectify his insufficient firepower. Supposedly, there had been 7 descendants who had colluded together to plot the destruction of the world. However, the gods put a stop to their plans and they were forced to flee to the ends of the earth. Their bastions of exile were what later came to be called the 7 Great Labyrinths. The Great Orcus Labyrinth being one of them, of course. The maverick who created it was rumored to reside in the deepest depths of this abyss everyone else called Hell. It's possible there might be a path to the surface there, in the deepest part of the labyrinth. I see. I can't imagine there being some huge, 1,000-story-long staircase at the bottom. But if this whole thing was made by someone from the age of the gods, then there's probably a teleportation circle or something. Hajime smiled at this new possibility. He returned his gaze to the work at hand. Yu and Kaori followed suit. Their eyes were glued to Hajime's hands. Hajime had become used to Kaori, but Yu's interest to his work was surprising. Is it really that interesting to watch me work? At Hajime's question, Yu nodded silently. Hajime thought she looked extremely cute just then, sitting there while hugging her knees with her fingers barely poking out of the sleeve of his baggy overcoat. He was overcome by a burning desire to hug and cuddle her, as if she was an oversized hugging pillow. Man. I can't believe a cute little girl like her is really 300 years old. Parallel worlds really are something. They even have eternal lawless. A real legal Lolita. Even transformed, Hajime never forgot any of his otaku knowledge. As if reading his thoughts, Yu suddenly looked up. You just thought something really rude, didn't you, Hajime? What do you mean? He played dumb, internally sweating at how perceptive her woman's intuition was. He should have realized it after basically living together with other girls in this abyss. Silently, he returned to his work, clearly hoping to distract Yu's attention. He apparently succeeded, as she started bombarding him with questions about himself. Hajime, and the others, what are you doing here? That was the question he had most expected. This was, after all, the bottom of the abyss, the figurative pits of hell. A place no one but monsters called home. But that was just the first of many questions to come. How are you able to control mana directly? How can you use the special magic of monsters? How are you able to eat monster meat and not die? What happened to your left arm? Are you even human, Hajime? What's that weapon you used earlier? After the first one, it was as if a dam had burst, and you pelted Hajime with questions ceaselessly. He answered each question thoroughly, not at all annoyed by the storm of inquiries. It looked like Hajime had a bit of a soft spot for you. It was understandable after he vowed to Yu's late uncle that he would protect her. Starting from the summoning, he retold the tale of how he wound up there. He told Yu about how they had been selected as heroes. And how he had been a worthless synergist with no useful offensive skills. To the labyrinth excursion and his fight with the behemoth. To his betrayal at the hands of one of his classmates. His descent into hell, how he met Kaori almost got killed by a pack of twin-tailed wolves. How he lost his arm to Kickmaster Rabbit before the Clawbear ate it. Kaori's discovery of the potion. Yu later explained to him that it was called ambrosia, how they found Shizuku almost got eaten by a pack of twin-tailed wolves, how they started eating monsters, how his knowledge from his original world gave him the idea for his weapon, his rematch with the Clawbear, and finally their descent through the dungeon until they reached her floor. Hajime talked at length about everything he could remember while Kaori added in here and there. And, as his tale wound down, Hajime could hear Yu's sniffling. What's wrong? Kaori asks. The concern was evident in her voice. It was surprising since Kaori supposedly hated Yu's guts. But, it seems that she wasn't fully lost yet. A gentle part of her was still in here, and Yu seemed to attract Kaori's maternal instinct. When Hajime and Kaori glanced back at Yu, they saw tears spilling from her eyes. Surprised, Kaori hurriedly wiped the tears from Yu's face and repeated her question. Hajime had stopped what he was doing because the surprise. What happened? What's wrong? Sniffle. Hajime and Bakaori. You suffered so much. Just like me. Yu was crying for their sake. Hajime and Kaori were momentarily taken aback, before they smiled reassuringly at her, and Hajime patted Yu on the head. However, Kaori seemed to miss the insulting nickname Yu had for her. Don't worry about it. All that stuff's in the past now. There's no point in getting hung up over it. I don't even really care about my old classmates that much anymore, and I'm not all that interested in getting revenge. All I care about now is polishing my skills, so I can make it out of here alive and find a way to return home. Hajime smiled at Yu, trying to calm her. Still sniffling, Yu closed her eyes and enjoyed the sensation of having her head patted, fully ignoring Kaori's words and looking very much like a big cat. However, she suddenly jumped with a start when Hajime mentioned returning home. You're going to go back? You mean to my own world? Of course I am. I miss it. A lot of things have changed now, but I still want to go home. I see. Yu looked down dejectedly then quietly whispered. I don't have a home to go back to, anymore. Hajime took his hand off Yu's head and awkwardly scratched the back of his own. He was by no means a dense person, which was why he had already vaguely realized Yu had started treating him as her new home, so to speak. It was the same reason she had asked him to give her a name. She was worried she'd lose her home again if he returned to his original world. Didn't you promise yourself that you will take care of her? Hajime mentally berated himself, but he still extended his hand to pat Yu's head once more. Well, how about coming with us, then? Huh? Her eyes went wide with surprise as she processed his words. She gazed deeply at him with her crimson eyes, wet with tears. Unsettled by the intensity in her gaze, he quickly began talking. I mean, well, back with me to my world. It's a boring place with nothing but humans, and someone with powers as amazing as yours might not find it to your liking, but... Well, I guess at this point my abilities are just as crazy. Anyway, I have no idea if you'll even like it or not. And it's only if you want to come, but, well, what do you say? That's right. There are many interesting things in our world, you know. Do you know that Hajime's parent created many games and manga? A story with image, I mean. Kaori also added in hurry. Yu blinked at them in confusion for a few seconds before timidly asking, I can really come with you? Though her voice was meek, her eyes were overflowing with hope. Hajime and Kaori stared at each other for a moment then smiled when they saw how vividly Yu's eyes were shining. They then nodded. As they did so, Yu smiled so brightly it almost felt as if her expressionless mask until now had just been an act. For a few moments, they were completely captivated by her radiant smile. As the matter of fact, Kaori felt envious of how beautiful Yu was. She didn't realize that she had surpassed her old beauty after her transformation. It was when she also realized the threat of Yu possessed for her place as Hajime's first woman and she put her guard up towards Yu again. Kaori looked at Hajime and elbowed him, snapping him for his days like an idiot. He quickly shook his head. Unable to keep looking at Yu, Hajime returned to his work. Fascinated, Yu sidled up to watch. However, this time she stuck much closer to him as she observed him transmute. Looking at that, Kaori didn't want to lose and stuck closer to Hajime too. He didn't get flustered easily since he was accustomed with Kaori's attempt in seduction so far. He continued his work steadily. At that moment, he realized that Shizuku had kept to herself. She had become silent and kept her distance away from Hajime. However, she would have listened to their conversation so far. Once in a while, she would send a conflicted gaze to him. Hajime realized Shizuku was still affected by his rant in Yu's ceiling room, and he inwardly felt bad for her. But he wouldn't take back his words. As he expected, he wouldn't forgive and forget what his former classmates had done to him easily. Maybe, after they begged and groveled in front of him and apologized earnestly, he would forgive them, though grudgingly, but he wouldn't just forget their past treatment so easily. Hajime was charmed by Shizuku's thoughtfulness to other people since it showed her kindness and that she was a good woman. However, it didn't mean he would easily bend down following her whim like a trained dog. He still had his pride as a man, and the suffering he experienced back in Japan and the suffering he forced to endure in this abyss was because of them. Of course, the main reason why he severed his ties with his classmates was his suffering in the abyss. What's this? Hajime was snapped from his thought by Yu's question. She pointed to the mechanical parts Hajime was currently transmuting. There was a thin cylinder about 1 meter long, red bullets 20 centimeters in length, and a few other strange objects. They were all sections of a new weapon he was developing in order to make up for Donner Schnitt's lack of power. Unlike Kaori, who had long-range attack, or Shizuku, who was confident with her broken speed, he needed something to increase his odds against his enemy. This is an anti-tank rifle, railgun enhanced edition. I showed you my other gun, right? This is basically just a bigger version of it, with special bullets. Once the parts were all slotted together, it would turn into a rifle that was 1.5 meters in length. He had pondered earlier how he could possibly increase his firepower, and had come to the conclusion there was no way to increase Donner Schnitt's explosive force, or the acceleration of its bullets. That simply meant that if he wanted something stronger, he would need to make a new gun. And said gun would of course need a wider and longer barrel, so it could fit the larger caliber bullets and accelerate them for longer. Hence he decided to model this one after an anti-tank rifle. Its size made it cumbersome to carry around and it could only hold one bullet at a time, but its power would be theoretically unmatched. Donner Schnitt alone was already slightly more powerful than a standard anti-tank rifle, so it stood to reason that a railgun-enhanced rifle would fire with enough force to pulverize most anything. The recoil alone from such a gun would be enough to destroy any normal human's arms. But, it was where his absurd physical statistic would pay its due. Theoretically, his new weapon, Schlagen, would be 5 to 6 times as strong as Donner Schnitt, or at least that was the hope. He had used parts harvested from the Scorpion to make it. After the battle had concluded, he had examined the Scorpion's super hard shell. To his surprise, his ore appraisal had been effective on it, and had shown him its properties. Star ore. A peculiar ore with a unique affinity to mana. The more mana it absorbs, the harder it gets. It appeared the Scorpion's toughness had come from building its shell from star ore. Since the Scorpion had probably been able to pour a huge amount of mana into it, it made for a perfect defense. It was also doubled as spear for close to mid-range combat. If it's classified as ore, I should be able to dismantle and recreate the same type ore, creating an ore with same property myself, right? He had tested that theory and had found he could replicate the ore quite easily. After which, a truly depressing thought had run through his mind. Wait a minute, if this is ore, I could have just transmuted that stupid Scorpion's shell off to save us a ton of trouble. In the end, they had still succeeded and he had gotten his hands on some interesting new materials, so he supposed it was all right. Once he had analyzed the ore's properties, he had instantly gotten to work making Schlagen's barrel. His skills had progressed considerably since the time he had built Donnerschnitt, Lanzettenblatt, and Reikiri, and his work went far more smoothly than before. He was very precise with how he made his bullets too. He used Tor ore for the shell's core, and applied an outer coating of Star ore over it to harden it. It was his fantasy version of a full metal jacket bullet. He also made sure his ratio of compressed blastric for the new bullets was perfect. Thanks to his duplicate transmutation derivative skill, a skill he created after he used ore desynthesis and ore synthesis for countless time to recreate ore he needed the most as his ammunition base, he was easily able to mass produce the bullets once he had finished a satisfactory prototype to work off of. They, except Shizuku, who was in dilemma, talked through the entire process as Hajime worked, and the time flew by quickly as he finished. Schlagen, it looked quite intimidating once it was all put together. He gazed at it proudly, satisfied with the quality of his work. Having finally finished, he realized he was quite hungry and grilled some of his Cyclops and Scorpion meat for them. You want some? Wait, you have transformed too, so it won't be problem, right? Eating monster meat had become a natural routine for Hajime and his companions by that point, and he invited Yu to eat with him out of habit before he realized Yu was also transformed like them. He glanced over to her and saw she was fiddling with his new weapon. When Yu noticed his gaze, she put the part of Hajime's new gun down for a moment and shook her head, saying, "I don't need any food. I'm full for now," while licking her lips suggestively. With her new appearance as fully developed teenager, she looked very seductive. She had transformed from a cute girl around her 13s into a well-endowed teenager around her 18s. She was around Kaori's old height before the healer was transformed. However, Hajime could ignore the alluring sight since Kaori had been shameless since she was open with her own feeling. I guess that makes sense. You survived 300 years without it after all. Still, just take a strip from each monster's sample. You may get interesting skill like us. The Cyclops gave us diamond skin skill and it is very useful for defense. It's more useful than simple skin hardening spell, I concur. No, I only need Hajime's blood. At that moment, Kaori interjected. Don't be like that, Granny Yu. You need at least eating the sample to gain the monster's skill. Kaori took the meat from Hajime's hands and pinned Yu's body under hers with her beautiful wrestling moves. Stop it. Bakaori. I don't need it, Hajime's blood is enough. Be obedient and eat your meal, you stupid vampire. Bakaori. Don't you understand my word? Are you really an idiot? When I said I don't wanna, I mean it, so stop it. Gaw. How obstinate are you? You just like stubborn old woman, are you not? Arg. Don't snap my wrists just like that. That was hurt, you stupid old vampire. Shut up. Don't call me old. Release your hands from my neck. Stop it. Why you'll snap my nay. Arg. At first, Yu was very adamant to refuse, her red eyes showing her disgust to the demonic beast meat, but Kaori didn't have any of it. Kaori forcefully fed Yu the strip of each monster's sample by shoving the meat into Yu's mouth after she snapped Yu's neck and ripped her jaw open. The sight of Kaori and Yu wrestling on the ground looked like quarreling sisters in Hajime's eyes, though Hajime tried to ignore the real carnage and sounds of cracking and snapping bone from their direction. He tried his best to ignore their brutality since they had the broken skill known as automatic regeneration, and to keep what remaining of his sanity intact. Leaving the wrestling girls behind, Hajime walked in Shizuku's direction with her share of food in his hands. He offered the cooked meat awkwardly, and Shizuku accepted it silently. The atmosphere between them was very awkward. At first, Hajime wanted to say something, but he decided to wait for another time once Shizuku had sorted her internal conflict. He would wait until Shizuku arrived in her own decision. If she followed his choice, he would accept her with open arms. But if she couldn't accept his choice, he would respect her choice and send her to her friends after they arrived in the Maverick's abode in the end of the labyrinth. After that, he returned back to his work. He needed to finish the weapon's maintenance before they could continue deeper into Orcus' Great Labyrinth. Oh, damn it. You can do it, Hajime. Yua. There's too many. You, get down and do something. Hajime was running through a clump of grass, with Yu on his back. Kaori was running next to him while spamming her long-range offensive magic to their pursuer. Shizuku, who was still keeping her distance from Hajime, kept the rear and cut any monsters that got uncomfortably close. Thick, tall grass, coming all the way up to their shoulders, stretched out in every direction as far as the eye could see. You would be completely buried within the tall grass. The reason Hajime, Kaori, and Shizuku was currently whacking weeds out of the way as he ran for his life was because they were being chased by hundreds of monsters at once. Once they finished their preparations, Hajime and his group had set out for the bottom of the labyrinth. They'd cleared 10 or so floors with ease already. Unlike Kaori, who was very good with support magic, Yu could cast any elemental spell nearly instantly, and supported Hajime from the rear. Though Yu was unparalleled when it came to offensive magic, it appeared Yu wasn't very skilled with barriers or healing. Perhaps it was because she unconsciously regarded them as unnecessary since she was able to automatically heal any wounds. Although they had ambrosia with them, Kaori's healing spells and barrier was very helpful to lower the use of ambrosia. That was why their travels had progressed smoothly until now. When they had first descended onto the floor they were currently on, they had been greeted by a massive sea of trees. Each tree was over 10 meters tall, and they were packed together tighter than sardines. The entire floor was extremely humid as a result. However, unlike the jungle floor they had traversed earlier, it wasn't sweltering hot. As they had been searching for the next staircase, they suddenly felt a huge earthquake. Seconds later, they had found themselves face to face with a huge reptilian monster. It looked just like a Tyrannosaurus Rex. The only difference was, for some reason, it had a beautiful flower adorning the top of its head. Its sharp fangs and overflowing bloodlust clearly marked a dangerous foe, but the sunflower resting atop its head made it seem more comical than deadly. This was quite possibly the most surreal monster Hajime had faced thus far. Furthermore, Kaori's examine skill also informed them that the flower was parasite that could control body it was parasitizing. Crimson Javelin. With Yu's soft chant, a spear of whirling flames formed out of thin air, then shot straight through the mouth of the T-Rex. The heat melted the T-Rex's entire head, leaving it dead in seconds. The ground shook as the beast crumpled. The flower perched on the remains of its head came off with a plop. Hajime and others stared on, speechless. Yu'd been asserting her strength more and more aggressively recently. Originally she had just supported Hajime from behind, but as time passed she eventually just started preemptively one-shooting anything that intended to do Hajime harm. It was very clear that Yu was biased since she wouldn't raise her hand, or use her magic in this case, when it was Kaori or Shizuku who was attacked. Hajime had fewer and fewer opportunities to show off his skills, and was starting to feel rather useless. Is she just one-shooting them because I'm nothing but a burden to her in combat? He began to think worriedly. If she really told him that he'd probably be depressed for weeks. And so, he holstered Donner and awkwardly asked Yu the question on his mind. Yu? I'm glad you're pumped to fight, but I feel like I haven't been pulling my weight recently. Yu turned back to Hajime, and despite her poker face, he could tell she was rather proud of herself. No, I will protect Hajime even though Hajime can do it. Because Hajime's my partner, husband. It seemed she just wasn't satisfied with only covering Hajime from behind. She had showed her assertiveness in the other area too. That's it. Kaori's frustrated voice was the only warning, and it was also very late before Yu's body was ripped away from Hajime's back by Kaori's hands. She seemed losing her patience for Yu's bold attempt for seducing Hajime. But Kaori, take off your hand from my body. Do you wish to die early, huh? No. I decided I'm going to send you to your grave earlier. Huh. I don't want to hear that from plus 300 years old vampire. That's it. Drop down and die, but Kaori, Hajime won't miss you even you die right here, right now. As expected, Granny Yu is very obstinate and shameless, eh? An old lady very desperate to find love until she stole others' man, huh? Stop being shameless and show a bit more tact befitting you old age. All is fair in love and war, and can you stop calling me old? As expected, a stubborn old woman is really stubborn till the end, huh? You said something about tact, but aren't you the tactless one? Do you know the cis code to not speaking about age in presence of men? Have you gone senile because of your ceiling? That cis code is only for young women, you're old. Stop deluding yourself and face the reality. Kaori is idiot, 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 Crimson Javelin. Ha. Heaven interruption. Look at you. Losing an argument and immediately using force when losing an argument. Pitiful. Shut up, shut up, shut up. Crimson Javelin, Thunder Lance, Ice Stake. As expected of an obstinate old lady, eat this. Petrifying gaze. Ah. Strength up. Arg. Your petrification is useless. I can just destroy my petrified body part and regenerate it back, you idiot. Composite magic. Thunder lance and crimson javelin. Thunder flame spear, be burned and electrocuted to death. What an unpleasant old zombie. Now, feel despair. Composite magic. Poison fog, paralyzing powder, wind of confusion, and blinding dust combo. Fall to despair, super harassment. Gale storm. As expected of idiot Kaori. It was useless if your cowardice attack can even get close to me. Eat this, lightning dragon. Hajime and Shizuku, who watched the carnage with dull eyes without uttering a sound, were keeping their distance from the two, quarreling and throwing dangerous spell to each other like nobody's business. Though he tried to tell himself that his new weapons, his and Shizuku's regenerated limbs and new skills, as well as Yu's offensive magic, were the reason behind their easy progress, the main reason was the destructive carnage between Yu and Kaori that wiped all monsters around them as collateral damages. The level of their carnage had surpassed the schoolgirls' cat fight long time ago, and it wouldn't be others' fault if they mistook them trying to kill each other by the intensity of their attacks to each other. The things were they couldn't die, even their bodies turned into mincemeat. As long as their heads were left intact and had mana, they would regenerate back. He had seen it by first-hand experience when Kaori's gale claws ripped Yu's body into tiny bits, or when Kaori's body turned into a smear of blood on the floor after being flattened by Yu's continuous ice boulders. Good grief, those two. While rubbing his forehead, Hajime complained to himself with a fed-up tone and expression. He could only wait their cat fight to stop with an amazed gaze. It was just him, or did he find the teary-eyed monsters being thrown away while creating a beautiful parabolic curve with their body a refreshing sight? He wasn't losing his sanity, right? Just like that, their shenanigans continued as they ventured deeper in Orcus' great labyrinth. Oh, footnote. And, you have the 7th chapter. I hope you enjoy it. Now, before I close this section, I want to thank you who have left sweet review behind. For those who gave me question and suggestion, thank you, and I'll answer it properly. As you can see, this story is a fanfic, so a twist that makes this story differ from the canon is given. If you don't like the twist I put in it, then you can write your own damn story or find a story that suits your taste. Anyway, I know Yu didn't transform into a demonized being after drinking Hajime's blood, but I decided to make it happen there. Although she changed, she's still a BS mage with proficiency on offensive spells, albeit she has upgrades, so to speak. I mean, Hajime in group is likely going to fight Holy Preachant differently from the canon, and it's more likely going to be different than how it will happen. Unlike the War for Humanity survival in the canon chapter plus 170. They need all edge they can get. For Kuki, too bad, I won't change my decision. Anyway, I will keep the premises like what I've planned. And, don't forget to leave your review, my dear reader, and see you in the next issue.